Well, let me perhaps just first clarify what I understand by multilateralism, because there's normally a kind of misunderstanding in my reading, at least. Multilateralism is not just the cooperation among 3 or more states as far as policy is concerned. It refers to a more fundamental principle of organizing international relations as a whole. In the reading of some of us, that is a very fundamental change as far as the world order after the Second World War is concerned. It has fundamentally changed relations in terms of what experts call diffuse reciprocity. That is, we're not looking into immediate gains, direct benefits, but are ready to accept a more longer-term spread of benefits. That's my understanding of multilateralism. It is in decline in my reading because we in the West, European and North American liberal democracies, have overexpanded, especially after the victory after 1989. And this overexpansion has seen a few successes, but also a few disappointments. Afghanistan, Iraq, and just name 2. This overexpansion, in combination with our domestic troubles in North America, US, Canada, but also in Europe these days, just brings us to the limits of what we think we can afford. That, in a nutshell, is, in my understanding, the reason why multilateralism is in decline. Implications, I believe that it has a lot to do with the way that we believe that world order ought to be organized. And to the extent that liberal world order has been thriving based on the West and its engagement with it, a decline in our engagement with this order and with multilateralism spells trouble for world order at large. The term was coined by Moises Naim, a foreign policy expert here in Washington, and he wanted to refer to what he considered to be a different kind of emphasis on how to organize international relations, getting the smallest number of powers together on a certain issue, that which have the largest impact. If you just take the example of the possible escalation of, say, the crisis over Iran in the next few months or years, and imagine how small the number of states would have to be in order to have a large impact, you immediately see that that number is pretty large indeed. And you could go on. I mean, climate change and other issues where this minilateral organization does not really bring us very far. It is important because it has become much more influential in terms of organizing international relations. There's the rise of new powers who cherish sovereignty, like Brazil, India, not to mention China and Russia. These powers also have changed the structure of international relations in the sense that the way that power was organized in the old days in a bipolar constellation is no longer relevant. We are in a multipolar world, and that means that a lot of uncertainty accompanies it. So these are the major structural changes. And then you have new issues. The financial crisis, which brought up the G20, which in my understanding is a minilateral arrangement. Those kinds of issues who are, at least in the reading of those major players, not being able to be dealt with in the context of all multilateral institutions. Well, I think UN reform, especially UN Security Council reform, is in principle possible. I mean, the Charter allows for certain procedures to actually do this, but it's not realistic in the immediate future. And that has, of course, a lot to do with all the major players who are building up a powerful opposition against individual aspirants for permanent seats. There is Italy in Europe, as far as Germany is concerned. Pakistan opposes India. China opposes Japan. Argentina opposes Brazil, just to mention those G4 countries who are among the major players pushing for reform. I think one way to actually try to move things forward on this front would be that the liberal democracies who are actually now in opposing camps, the so-called coffee club, includes members such as Italy, Canada, South Korea, Mexico. On the other hand, you have the G4, Germany, Japan, India, and Brazil, all liberal democracies. So actually getting those liberal democracies to think about what kind of structural reforms in the long term would actually benefit us from a democratic point of view, in line with what we consider to be a liberal world order, that in itself would help. So bringing together people and experts from these countries to think fresh about what kinds of structural changes you might need for global security architecture in particular would be a first step towards at least moving forward a little bit.